Not a bad time to continue where we left off, doesn't it? Hi! If this is the first time watching one of my videos, my name is Litsu. This is Litsu Roleplays, where I'll talk anything about RPG design and game design, naturally. Now, this is gonna be the second part of the first video that I decided to make for this series, in which I was making my personal confessions in regards to Dark Sun. I got the book last time. I only was able to get to the 22nd page, even though I was speaking like for about 40 minutes. I hope this was entertaining for you. It was certainly entertaining for me. However, I think it is fitting in a good moment for us to take off where we left. Hopefully, I'm not gonna take that much. At least not in the sense that I'm not gonna ramble, or I'm gonna make the best attempt not to ramble as much as I did last time. Basically, where we left off is finishing my explanations, or at least my thoughts in regards to the classes and races of the setting. Which of them I thought were dumber than other ones. But in this case, the rules from now on, they take the approach, or at least try to take the framing of explaining how to run the world of Dark Sun, rather than trying to say or give you character options and all that, which I think is pretty useful. Sadly, or at least that was an attitude that simply stopped being emphasized very often, especially nowadays, in which the books give you character options, they give you monsters, and they might give you names and one or two locations, but they don't tell you exactly how to run the world as an existing place, as a living setting, right? At most, they might give you plot hooks, even though I'm personally I'm against the idea of plot hooks, mostly because sometimes an RPG campaign is not about the plot, it's about the players and what and how they affect and interact with the living world in which a campaign exists in. But anyways, let's proceed. Now, at this point, the setting starts to introduce the concept of multi-classing, the starting money, non-play characters, and all that, and which is great. Now we are starting to get into the description of all the classes. If I'm not gonna get too much into them, mostly because I already gave my explanation or my thoughts on them last time, so I'm just gonna quickly pass the pages through this. Except for some comments. Turns out that for the clerics, remember the clerics cast spells based on the plane of the elemental planes. They worship the element specifically, and they try, or at least they attempt to promote set specific elements or the attitudes related to them. That means, and that is of course way better explained in their own supplement, Earth, Wind, and Fire, I think. Well, what was the name of it? It was certainly not the Disco Band, which would be actually hilarious if it were. But in any case, the idea is that, for example, if you are a very rigid person or very stoic, you are inclined more to the elemental plane of Earth. If you are more like aloof or carefree and all that, you're probably an air. If you're fluid and simply going with the flow, as the name suggests, you're water. And if you're fiery and aggressive and all that, you're probably exactly fire, right? But that's mostly in regards to that their own specific supplements. They don't dive too much into it, as in at all. But in any case, yeah, I mean, clerics are, again, they're pretty interesting. Although they don't emphasize how rare they should be, especially as the setting went on. In all reality, they should be as rare or as mysterious as druids, or if you're playing in a city, there should be pretty much alien. And I would have liked to at least have some semblance of a city cleric or a city priest, because in Iron Age societies, they were polytheistic societies. They worship tons of gods, usually related to idols or cities or abstract concepts. especially before the Iron Age. Before the Iron Age, they were like physical objects. They were idols. They worship idols in the Near East. Before the transition to more abstract concept with the Greeks and all that. But anyway, that's mostly the niche filled with Templars. But the Templars sometimes feel like bad guys. But let's not get too much into that. This is not the point of this video. I already made my explanations on it. However, they give you some other options, such as how bar poisoning works, extra thieving skills for the thief, based on the dexterity that they got. Because in this case, in Dark Sun, your stats can go all the way to 24, and which, spoilers, this was not possible in second edition before that. Usually when the highest case would be when you reach like 18 strength, and then you gotta roll a D100 in order to get bonus on top of the regular high strengths. But anyway, multiclassing. Now multiclassing is interesting because Dark Sun make the decision of introducing the concept of, how about instead of rolling hybrid classes and having like a multi-class, 2 characters of 2 classes at one, how about we have 3? It kinda sucks. I mean, it does not suck, mind you. It follows the same concepts. It's pretty intuitive once you understand how multi-class works in second edition. Because the way it works is that you take 2 classes, let's say cleric, fighter. You add up the experience requirements in order to level up on one, and then divide them by the number of classes that you have, and that's pretty much the level up requirements that you have. And in this case, instead of saying, okay, let's do it with 2, you can do it with 3. Wow, innovation! No. I mean, it's not rocket science about what you can do or what you cannot do, or it's not that really game changing. It feels kind of like feature creep in a way, because unless you are absolutely min-maxing your character, the idea of, I'm gonna multi-class a fighter plus a thief plus psionesis, or I'm gonna multi-class a defiler with a psionesis with a thief, it's not that engaging in regards to the archetypes. You're just trying to make your character be more quote-unquote unique without making so, and it could fall into the gimmick of, let me have a can-do-everything character, which is certainly not, a little bit feature creep in a way, but also I don't think it's the most ideal situation to be in, especially in a campaign, because of course there's always going to be that player who understands the minutia of the game system in and out, and he's just gonna take over the spotlight. Or even worse, if you have a really bad DM, well, there's gonna be that DM who's gonna come in with their mage / thief / psionesis female elf who can do everything and do no wrong, right? But again, this is mostly the consequence of a rules that it's meant to promote more like uniqueness within your character, but instead it can incentivize that type of behavior. But anywho, now you also have world class characters. Now, for some reason, don't ask me why. For some reason, demi-humans can multi-class, while humans can only dual-class. Okay, what's the difference between the two? Okay, if you multi-class, you're leveling up a character in 2 classes, or in this case 3 classes, at the same time, right? With all the requirements needed in order to level up those classes. But that's only for demi-humans, dwarves, elves, tricrine, and all that. For human though, humans dual class, and that means that you take one class, you take it, and whenever you choose to, you decide to leave that class behind and start to level up in another class. So I can start with a thief, and for some reason I just decided that okay, now I have the proper thieving skills at a good level that I feel like I could moderately have success with them. Now by 9th level I'm gonna switch over to a fighter, right? And I can take that fighter all the way to level 20 should I want to. And after that, that's it. It's only between two classes. I do not know the idea or the reason of why it's so, because only humans can do that. And humans can only do that with dual classes. They cannot multi-class. Demi-humans can multi-class, and that's it. However, the reason of why I'm putting so much emphasis in it is because one of the first few source books that came after the box set was Dragon Kings, and that's where things get interesting because they give humans huge options for dual class. And I'm talking about the concept of epic levels whenever you have your character from level 21 to 30, because in Dark Zone, especially when the meta plot starts kicking in, they explain the reason of why there are dragons, what happens with a Psionicist, what happens with a druid, what happens with a cleric, and they start to like provide these huge metamorphoses that can only work if you take like your cleric plus Psionicist or your mage plus Psionicist / defiler or preserver, and it's a pretty important choice. Because the moment that you start to get into that, you get into this huge role-playing, super convoluted mechanics in order for you to advance in levels and further a metamorphosis into, well, spoilers, a dragon, which is like the equivalent of spilling oil in the ocean in regards to the environmental damage of the setting, or becoming an Avangian, who is like the counterpart and kind of like a being that tries to, or brings life up just from that, or become an elemental in and of itself, or become a nature spirit. And these requirements are absolutely botched. They, of course, are absolutely convoluted, and they are meant, from what I read one time, the idea is not for your character to do that, even though technically you can't. They give you the options for that. However, it's for DMs to potentially drive the campaign onto that. So basically your characters may work for a higher level NPC whose objective is to get to that point, and now you have the characters running errands for them in order to gather all that, because they want either one, save Athas, either two, save a specific location, or either three, they are being tricked and start creating another dragon. That's Dragon Kings, by the way, and they also give stats to the Sorcerer Kings. But let us proceed, because after this we get to an interesting section, and it's character trees. Now, it is okay. They are not reinventing the wheel, even though once you read it, it kind of like you feel like they're trying to. Basically, a character tree is one mechanic that they introduce in which, you create 3 characters. The world is super lethal, so your character may and will die. So now so whenever you start a campaign, you create 3 characters and you have 3 backups. That's basically it. However, the idea of the character tree is that one, the characters starts advancing at the same, or start getting experience at the same rate as the character you have on play. So whenever you want to, like, I've been playing a mage for a couple sessions, I'm now going to a cave and I'm gonna get a lot of loot, so we might be needing a thief, for example. And now, I'll go to mage, whoop, I slide in the thief, and just leave the mage whatever is safe, like at a town or something, and then you start playing that thief. And then both characters start to get like the same amount of experiences. Then it's assumed that they are in different parts of the world, just doing their own adventures and running errands. And once they meet up, that's when the player can choose who to play as a moment. And they cannot be, and they say it specifically here, they cannot be in the same place. They do not count as followers. They do not count as you cannot have 2 characters at the same time. You're not playing 2 characters. Which, okay, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any critiques to that. I'm just confused because it is on a too wide spread with a lot of text explaining what I can do with it. And in fact, it's not that unintuitive. I think it's just common sense. If you're running a campaign, common sense is that in the case of all editions, specifically OSR editions, 0 hit points equals death, and your mage can start with 1 hit point, and that's it, right? So you get killed in 1 hit. Creating characters or creating backup characters was not a new thing back then, and it's certainly not a new thing now. That's what I think is so odd about this, because it's kind of like, okay, you are teaching me how to do math in this book. I think I already knew that, But anyway, is it redundant? Probably. That's probably the word that I'm going for. Redundancy. Now they give you an interesting. There's a whole chapter for alignment, and the chapter is, I think it's only 2 pages. Started for a chapter for a page 41. Yeah, it's 2 pages. However, they give you some interesting examples in how lawful good to chaotic evil works, because apparently, because of the harsh nature in life in the setting, good does not behave the same way as we might think in Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, or in a Noble Bright setting. This is grim dark. This is so edgy. So the concept of what is good or what is not, it might be slightly different for what we could expect, right? Which is fine. They're nice for flavor, and I don't really hate it. It's a too widespread, just trying to explain it. However, they have an interesting section in which they explain that, hey, if you are running out of water, probably your character will slowly but surely decline from lawful good or whatever alignment they were more and more to chaotic evil, because at least from the matrix that I grasped from it, good equals being more caritative, being able to give more, be more selfless, while evil is selfish for the sake of being selfish, and lawful being society, chaos being, well, chaotic and just going with the flow in nature, right? It's that kind of conflict. Even though the main cosmic conflict of the setting does not belong to alignment, it's not from Moorcock. It's not this conflict of eternal champions between law and chaos. I think it's pretty nice from a role-playing standpoint to at least read the chapter once. Now we move towards proficiencies. Now this is a new thing that they introduced in 2nd edition. Well, sorry, it was not in 2nd edition. It was in Unearthed Arcana from 1st edition. However, they became part of the core rules in 2nd edition, which was the proficiencies. The idea was that, hey, if you are making a character or a quote-unquote boring class, like a fighter, how can we make your character more unique if everything that your class does is hit things or get better at hitting things? So they introduced the concept of non-weapon proficiencies, which is like what we will call skills nowadays. But in this case, they were like a huge list of classes in that sense, in which they take like your ability score and they subtract it or add something to it, and that's the specific difficulty check that you gotta make in order to be good at that skill. And they have a huge list of it. We go from gen cutting to horsemanship to astronomy to agriculture, administration, and it's like a huge long list. And naturally, they decided to introduce some new ones. In this case, they got bargain, heat protection, psionic detection, sign language, water find, bureaucracy, concealment, warrior, and somatic concealment. Now, they divided by classes, meaning that you gotta be at least this class to be access to them. And my favorite, and in fact, I added it as part of the Preserver class, and it's called somatic concealment. That means, because in the cities or in any settlement, magic is frowned upon. In fact, if they found you're a magician, they're probably gonna burn you like a witch. So all the wizards that are preservers or the fighters, they have like this weird mix of sign language, so that under their robes, in this case, they just start to like make the somatic components of the spell, like the hand signs and all that, without being detected in a way that nobody notices around them, and they can cast the spell, right? That is awesome. That is nice flavor. And in fact, when I made the Preserver class for Old School Essentials, I made it part of of the core class. It's a class feature. You know how to conceal it, and you gotta roll a skill. It's kind of like a skill that you can do in order to communicate with other preservers in the Veil Alliance and all that. And it's super awesome. When you put it like that, that is true flavor, because it integrates the culture of the setting with the flavor of the class and its mechanics. And that's the way that you make a compelling setting. Now, moving on, they give you some rules for that. Now we get into the equipment. Now the deal with equipment in Dark Sun is that this is a metal poor world, so they give you like a bunch of rules in regards to materials or weapons. The minimum material that you can get is wood, and then you can jump from bone to obsidian, stone, and you end up with metal. Now, metal, the idea with it is that they become the equivalent of magical weapons. However, what happens here is they give you like a whole table in which they put some negative modifiers onto the 2 hit rolls, and then they give you negative modifiers to the damage as well, which I don't think is that bad, but I think it could be better. Instead of punishing the player for having to use a non-metal weapon, or worse, having to force the DM of not being able to hand metal weapons efficiently. And believe me, once you roll the treasure tables long enough, you're gonna notice that probably metal is fairly common, right? Or at least not as uncommon as it might seem mechanically or lore-wise. I would play with the notion of breaking the equipment. In fact, that's what I did specifically. Like, hey, if you are gonna use a wood sword, okay, fine, you can do around the same damage as a regular sword. However, you make a bad roll, it breaks. You play with a bone lance, boom, it breaks, and just keep on that. And the only difference between one material or one superior material to an inferior is how easy or how hard it is to break it or bend it. And once you get to metal weapons, and here's the thing, with metal weapons, you get to hit as regularly. They never break. However, they can be bent. But here's the detail. You can fix it. You cannot do that with any other weapon. It breaks, it breaks. You gotta get a new one. And that notion of having to manage the weapons that you carry or the weapons that you find, or having to improvise them within the wilderness, that is what sets up the pace for a very interesting scenarios and campaigns. And you don't need to make a plot out of it. You don't need to make like a planned story about what's going to happen. In fact, no, this is just the game allowing you to have mechanically those kind of situations, and they add flavor to the game session. They add tension, which is one of the most important things whenever you're running a game. Now, another thing that they added is the notion of the money system. Now, in this case, this is like the Bronze Age, in the sense that they don't use money the same as we do. Well, not the same as regular D&D will. They use another type of material. In this case, is ceramic, and ceramic can be divided in 8 bits, and they are like the equivalent of cents. But then you start like going up the scale all the way till you get to gold pieces, and gold pieces are the equivalent of insanely valuable coins. That's like the equivalent of the transactions that countries make with each other for huge projects or huge trade deals and all that. Regular people is just expected to grab bits or copper pieces, or ceramic pieces, and then going up the ladder. Now, they don't add much else. They add like their own list of weapons. Now, when it comes to the list of weapons, Dark Sun sadly commits a huge sin that is usually not recommended with campaign setting. And if you're making your own setting, all props to you. However, this is very important for you to understand. And it's that they start to add these weird exotic names to the weapons in a way that they are not intuitive, or at least they don't spell exactly what they are out of the name. You gotta like read the description of what it is. Just to give an example, you got the Chakcha. The chacha is kind of like a jarring bone that is kind of like sharpened on one edge, and you can use kind of like a club. You can call it a bone club, and it will be the same. You can have the gifka, which is the point of a chacha, put on a pole arm. But then you got some better ones, like the turtle shell, and that is my favorite one because it's kind of like a buckler in a way, but made with the shell of a turtle, and then it has like a retractable knife, and you can use it as a club while also cover yourself with it. That is a good idea for a weapon, and you can infer what it is by just reading the name instead of using this weird ass language that they invent just for the setting. Which, in a nutshell, the lesson is: if you're gonna make an RPG setting, and you have like these weird instruments that they use in the setting, make at least intuitive from within their name, because hey, probably the people in this setting know and understand the concept of what this instrument is. We don't. We live on Earth. We don't use that language. You gotta make it easier for us to understand. Otherwise, it will be hard for us to simply understand it. Unless you're pretty clever with words, which most people are not. Okay? Don't overestimate yourself. Now, we go for magic. They introduce some new spells. They separate the magic in regards to spheres, because clerical magic, in regards to clerical magic, they don't work as in schools, they work as in spheres. Clerics can cast the spheres of cosmos, which is like the generic sphere, plus their own spell of the element that they chose. So a fire cleric gets the sphere of fire and all that. Templars can only cast the ones for the cosmos, and druids have their own sphere of nature that they can cast in conjunction with the spheres of the cosmos. That's pretty much how it works. They introduce some new mechanics on that. They add some rules in regards to how much soil or how much of what area do you defile. They introduce trees of life. Trees of life are kind of like batteries of magical energy that one can suck life force out of, and they just start to regenerate. So in a way, it's kind of like a charger. So you don't start just consuming the world around you. Usually the property of sorcerer kings and all that. Experience. Now for experience, they add some interesting mechanics. Why? Because in regular D&D, they use, or at least in OSR D&D, including to 2nd edition, in the core rulebooks, you get experience by 1 defeating monsters, 2 1 experience points equals 1 gold piece. In the case of Dark Sun, is equals 1 ceramic piece. You still get experience from monsters, but also you get experience by doing certain activities. So in that way, you are encouraged to follow the archetype of the class that you're playing. For example, a fighter. A stand commanded in combat or war gives you 50 experience per day. That means that you want to be part of an army or a war band or get into fights with people. If you are the fighter, if you have to be employed by a sorcerer king, and you get 25 experience points per spell level. In Berserker, in any way, you gotta maintain spellcasting secrecy. That means being super secret and super sketchy about it, and you get like 50 experience points per spell level. The idea is not bad. I mean, I do see the value on it. The issue that I see with it is that one, there are very few. 2, they are very specific. And 3, they do not adjust to every single scenario, or at least not every single scenario in which your player are gonna be in. So I suggest just use them. It's not bad. Just don't think that they are gonna be super deterministic. It's kind of like a half-ass in that way. Anywho, they give you some tips in how to reward experience in more specific context. And now they introduced the concept of the arena combats. Now this is for the if you want to play on gladiator combat, you got the gladiator class, and they add like some scenarios in which, not scenario specifically, just more like listed ideas on what kind of games you could have your players involved in. It's usually involved that if you are a gladiator, you are a slave. That is right in the class, but also even if you are like a preserver or a scientist, once you get caught and turned into slavery, they're gonna put you to fight in the slave pens, in the gladiator arenas. Nonetheless, they give you like this series of scenarios. For example, tribal combat. Many people accused of crimes. They just fight each other. Whoever wins gets their freedom. Bestial combat is the amatua bestias, the weight that they use that the Romans used to execute Christians in antiquity. They just tie them to a pole and throw a lion to eat them live. Test of Champions, that's more like a tournament style. You have like these fighters that are kind of like superstars, kind of like boxing, kind of like superstars in tournaments, right? Which is fine. They give you rules for wagering, rules for betting. It's not bad. It's pretty cool, actually. They give you some rules about your character not dying once they reach 0 hit points. It's optional as well, but it's a pretty classic staple nowadays, especially with the OSR, in which, hey, if your character reaches 0 hit points, they start to lose hit points every round, and once they reach once they reach -10, they die outright. And guess what? Introduced here. Now, they start promoting the battle system, the mass combat rule set that they have. That's a whole separate book that you gotta purchase if you want to do it. In fact, Dark Sun initially was intended to be the default setting for that mass combat rule set. Of course, it didn't end up being the case, mostly because they just thought that it was so awesome that they just had to give it out as a campaign setting. But in this case, yeah, they give you rules for that. Rules for treasure. Again, mostly the idea is that gems are a little bit more common than metal, like gold and silver. Ceramic pieces are now the new deal. All of these things are pretty good because they are telling you, or that's the way that the designers have to inquire or incentivize the style of play that they give. And in this case, it's pretty generalized. Like, you could have survival adventures, you can have arena combats, you can have a lot of noble intrigue in the cities between the Templars, the Filers, and the Preservers, and all that. And I think it's cool. More settings should do something like that, which not all of them do, by the way. Once we get into that, I'll show you why. Spelljammer! But you'll see what I mean by a setting not giving you the right tools to run it properly. Anywho, all right, now you got some magic items, new magic items, pretty cool. They're not that interesting, although one is absolutely hilarious because in this case they give you, for example, the Rod of Divining. This item is a small Y stick in which you can start detecting the water sources that are close by, and it starts to agitate, and it's a magical item. It's hilarious. Not gonna lie, that is absolutely hilarious. Props to them. They give you some guidelines for encounters. They usually ask you to. They outright say, okay, use a philosophy present in the core rulebooks, the Dungeon Master Guide, and all that. Encounters in cities, monsters, and they give you a whole list of monsters that you can use from other settings. From the Monsters Compendium, and some Wilderness Encounters rules. Now, my deal with encounter rules, sadly, is that they are okay. They give you a wide enough variety per at least per terrain type. I usually more of the type of, hey, if you want to give me encounters that I can use to set up adventure hooks. I will usually call it adventure seeds, but the idea is that, hey, give me a monster that is probably wounded that is probably looking for something, or if it's intelligent, that is having some difficulty, that I can start to bargain with them, and it leads me to this secondary quest that if I complete, I get some extra treasure, or it leads me to another encounter, and so forth and so forth. If you can grasp that cycle of giving multiple adventure seats and reward them, leading to further adventure seats, the world starts to run itself. The campaign starts to run by itself, and before you know it, you are 6 months within the campaign. Everybody's hooked on it because now you have multiple situations going on in which the players can all be involved or are involved in, just by 5 or 6 encounters that you generated at the first month of the campaign. Just giving you ideas, okay? I'm just giving you guidelines. Now we proceed. They give you the encounters. They give you they give you some interesting stuff, such as NPCs, how to run NPCs, when to encounter, where to encounter, the roles of a Templar depending on the level, once you find them in the city. Rules for vision and light. Remember, this is Dungeons and Dragons, meaning that if you're gonna do dungeoneering, you should have some rules in regards to how light and vision works. They give you a whole chapter for that, even though it's only 1 page. It's hilarious. Here it says, Chapter 13, Vision and Light. Next page, Chapter 14, Time and Movement. But anyway, if you are super greedy or super methodical in the way that you handle light, that's a chapter. Now, Time and Movement. Time. Now, they explain to you and they give you like a sort of attention calendar in the way that they track years. Basically, they follow like 2 cycles at the same time related to the 2 moons. And depending on the cycle that you are, the years change. For example, you have a list of names related to 1 moon on one end, and you have another list of names for a year related to the second moon. So you go to one year over here, you go to 1 year over here, and then you go down the list, and then they start to like overlap within each other, right? In this case, just it's cool for giving a good flavor to the setting, or giving this uniqueness. Even though, again, I recommend not to use weird names, but in this case, they are not bad names. It's just unintuitive to use. However, once the players start to grasp it, or once you get accustomed to it, it gets kind of fun. And just for pointing out, okay, the starting year of the campaign is called Year of Priest Defiance in the 190th King's Age. The next year of the Messenger, it's kind of like the Holy. It's usually never provided what exactly the messenger does. It's usually related to prophecies and religious ceremonies, but that's it. They never explained. I don't think nobody has ever done anything useful with that, as far as I know. If you did, hey, share it out. I would like to read your stuff. But in this case, yeah, the messenger is kind of like a comet that is meant to be next year. Kind of like an almond, right? Rules for dehydration. Those are cool rules. Basically, whenever you don't drink enough water, you don't get enough food, you start to lose a certain amount of points in Constitution, and if you get to like 0 or below 0, you're dead. So water is important. Again, it promotes survival. Overland movements, that's cool. Terrain modifiers, use of vehicles. They add a lot of new vehicles, such as silt skimmers, kind of like whenever you are like on the sea of silt. It's kind of like this very fine sand-like substance, even though it's technically finer than water for some reason. It makes no sense, but it's fantasy, so who cares? But you're kind of like have to go in these kind of floating boats that are have huge wheels that start rolling down through the sand. But that's just one example of the kind of vehicles that they have. They got like wagons, they got like mounts. You can get like giant scarabs, giant beetles. giant ants, giant lizards. You get the point, right? Horses are not a thing in this setting, or at least they probably went extinct. This is not the age of mammals. This is the age of insects and reptiles. Which is cool. If you like John Carter, I recommend that you read that book. It gives you a little bit of hindsight about how life in Atlas would be. And they're good books, by the way. And well, would you look at that? That was the end of the rules book, of the rules set. Because right after this, we go into one of the most influential pieces, one of the most influential booklets for Dark Sun as a setting in all the fandom ever. But also what I think is one of the best ways to provide the lore of your setting. And it's called the Wanderer's Journal. Which of course is going to be the next video. Why? Because I've been going for roughly 41 minutes. I'm exhausted. As you can see, I'm freshly coming over from the gym. But nonetheless, I just wanted to tell you that if you reach that point, I deeply appreciate it. I thank you so much that I've been able to entertain you enough to be listen to me rambling all my thoughts, all my unstructured thoughts, because I've been basically improvising this. Probably I could make a little bit more effort in regards to planning what I'm going to say, but I think that it's better if I'm more genuine about it instead of trying to add or trying to make the right intonation and all that. Nonetheless, hey, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like. It'll help me with the algorithm. I'm just starting, so any help that I could get, I would gladly appreciate it. But if you'd like to support me, please buy my books. I'm gonna leave my links on the description below, because I have some interesting, awesome booklets that you could find, such as Cities Made Lazy if you want to generate cities, Deathly Grunts if you want to have better hordes, better bandits, or my first adventure, Fane of the Laruleans. It's awesome. I dedicated so much time with it. But if anything, hey, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.